Okay, so Dr. Iqbal, would you please introduce yourself and your program?
Sure. Thank you for doing this. My name is Zafar Iqbal, and I'm an associate professor of marketing at the Driehaus College of Business. And the program that I'm leading in December is Business and Culture in a Rapidly Growing Economy. I am taking students to India. This will be the 12th time that I'm taking students to India. And it's a really exciting trip. It essentially enables students to visit over 5 cities in a span of about 16 days in the country. And the students range from undergraduates to graduates to doctoral students, and they come from all across the university, although the program itself is business focused.
Thank you very much. Can you tell us a little bit about some highlights of the program, activities, cultural experiences, special visits, and speakers?
Sure. So I'm just going to sort of circle back to what the topic of the program itself is, what the focus of the study abroad is. It deals with India, and in the portfolio of study abroad programs, it deals with an emerging market. So most programs are going to economies that are fully developed. India is a rapidly growing, developing economy, and the focus of the program is understanding the challenges of starting, scaling, and sustaining a business in a fast-growing emerging market such as India. I'm also very interested in exploring how Indian culture mediates the execution of business strategy. As you very well know, that culture is extremely important in doing international business, and Indian culture has its own unique aspects, and how do those aspects impact how business is conducted in an emerging economy. And my perspective is for the participant in the program to understand how to start, scale, and run a business successfully from the perspective of the CEO of the company. So some of the highlights of the trip are we visit 5 different cities. As you know, India is a very, very diverse country, 20 plus languages, at least 100 different languages that are not even considered official languages. It has many geographical, territorial distinctions. And so we're visiting 3 different regions, 5 different cities, but 3 different regions, the West, the South, and the North. And we will be visiting about 12 different companies that range from exciting startups in the digital space to small businesses in the spiritual health and wellness space to medium-sized businesses in environmental and manufacturing to really large-scale enterprises in e-commerce and IT technology. So we cover the gamut of companies, and we study those companies and their strategies from the perspective of the CEO, because we get the CEOs to give us about 2 to 3 hours of their time. So the main highlight of the professional part of the trip is that we have about 12 company visits, each lasting about 2 to 3 hours, talking to the CEO of the company about his or her perspective on managing the company and growing the company in an emerging market such as India. From a personal perspective, this trip is very exciting because you're getting to travel with a local. I was born and raised in India. I speak 5 different Indian languages, and I have a lot of contacts in India. So I enable you to get the local experiences. And some of the few ways that I do that is that in many of the cities, we have highly hyper-local experiences, such as hiking on a hill that only locals go to. I have arranged in the past, and I plan to do so this time too, I arrange home visits for about 2 to 3 hours where groups of students end up going to an Indian's house for tea, and then you have very in-depth conversations about personal life, family, professional aspects, so you get that in-depth understanding. We also visit a university where you get to interact with students. And I also enable you to have plenty of time so that you can explore these cities, as challenging as they are, by yourself, right? So you get to have a local experience, you get to do local activities, and you get to meet with locals as part of this trip. And one of the key highlights the students have gotten from the trip in past years is the notion of jugaad. And jugaad is just an Indian term of innovating with less resources, right? So as you realize, in an emerging market, we're not resource intensive, we're very resource constrained in India. So how do you actually get companies to innovate? How do you get people to sustain and manage and thrive and grow in their lives with less? So jugaad literally means doing more with less. And students really walk away with an in-depth understanding of how over-resourced in some cases we are in the United States. those are some of the reasons that I'm really excited about this trip and some of the highlights of the trip.
Thank you very much. Can you tell us a little bit about what you personally are most excited about in leading this program?
Yes, I lived in India I was born and raised in India. I lived in India for 20 plus years before I moved to the United States. And for every year that I've been in the United States, I've gone back to India at least once or twice. I have family there, and for me, it's very interesting that I have my own notions of what India is as a person who was born and raised there, as a quote unquote local of India. But for me, the exciting part is always getting students to see India for the first time and then exploring India through their eyes. So I always take a more laid back approach in many situations where students can ask me a lot of questions, but they also share their experiences about India with me, thus helping me learn. And I reciprocate that by giving my own perspective. So just sharing the country of my birth with students from DePaul is extremely exciting. The second part that's really exciting to me is getting students to see a country that they have preconceived notions about. So Hollywood has not done India any favors. Most newspaper and media articles don't do India any favors because it's such a challenging country to write about or express in movies that people always focus on the marginal sort of, shocking shock value of what India is. But part of my excitement is to normalize India for people to realize that this is a country that's going to play an immense part in the world's future. It has 1/7 of the world's populations. 4 of the major religions of the world came out of India. And people just don't know much about India. So I'm excited about sort of taking away some of the preconceived notions and forming positive memories about India.
Thank you. And finally, why should students choose this program?
Well, why not, right? So if you look at the portfolio of study abroad programs, we travel all over the world, but I still believe that Asia as a continent is underrepresented. And within Asia, it's mainly East Asian or China as the focus. South Asia is largely neglected. And South Asia is an integral part of Asia. It represents a sort of an underutilized part of the study abroad portfolio. So that's one thing. The other underutilized part is students don't get exposure to emerging markets, right? So most study abroad programs go to developed economies. Ours is the one that goes to an emerging market, and the word emerging is misleading because this is a very fast-growing economy, and that changes students' perspective of what is possible in a fast-growing economy. So the South Asian perspective, the fact that it's an emerging economy. The third part is the diversity of the country itself. In the United States, we pride ourselves on being a multicultural, multiracial society. But India, I believe, is the original multiracial, multicultural society in that, as I mentioned, 20 plus languages. Every 100 miles that you travel, the language changes, the cuisine changes, the costume and the clothing changes. So it is a truly diverse country. And if students realize that people can coexist in this way, it makes me very excited for people to actually realize that it's possible to do business and thrive in a diverse economy and society like India. The fourth part is the fact that India is going to impact your career, right? So many companies have back offices in India. India is a large nation of English speakers, and many companies are emerging out of India that you've never heard of that are now hiring students from DePaul. They're hiring students from all over the world. So Indian companies, large companies, are expanding outside the borders and becoming multinationals, and they are going to impact your career either as employers or competitors or collaborators. And it makes sense to get to know some of these companies. And the last part of why you should do this trip is because it's a difficult trip to plan by yourself. India is on the bucket list of many people. Yeah, we'll visit the Taj Mahal, we'll visit other UNESCO World Heritage sites, but even doing visiting India as a tourist is difficult by yourself. Never mind the access that you have to locals and the great companies that we'll be visiting. So you're going with somebody who's from there. You're going with somebody who loves the country. You're going with somebody who's experienced as a study abroad leader. This will be a trip that'll be incredibly difficult for you to pull off, but I promise you it'll be life-changing and in some ways, dare I say, mind-altering. So you should really, really consider India.